Hyunwoo Kim stepped off the transport shuttle and into the massive halls of the Galactic Senate. The buildings stretched higher than any skyscraper on Earth, with walls made of some kind of crystal that seemed to glow from within. Alien beings of every shape and size moved through the corridors, their voices creating a symphony of clicks, hums, and growls that echoed off the walls. This was his first day as Earth's new ambassador. After 6 months of training, he thought he knew what to expect. He was wrong. The first thing that caught his attention was the weapons. Every single alien delegate carried at least one visible weapon. The tall, blue-skinned Vorthons had energy rifles slung across their backs. The insect-like Chitarans wore what looked like plasma swords on their belts. Even the small, peaceful-looking Endarians had small pulse pistols attached to their robes. Hyunwoo looked down at his simple black diplomatic suit. No weapons, no armor. Just a data pad and his identification badge. First time human? Hyunwoo turned to see a Vorthon delegate approaching. The alien's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, and his hand rested nervously on his weapon. Yes, I'm Ambassador Kim from Earth, and you are? Delegate Nexus of the Vorthon Trade Union. The alien's translator made his voice sound mechanical. I was curious to see another weaponless human in the Senate. Weaponless? Hyunwoo frowned. Is that unusual? Nexus made a sound that might have been laughter, but his eyes showed no humor. Humans are the only species allowed to enter Senate assemblies without weapons. It is the law. That seems backwards, Hyunwoo said. Why would we be the only ones not allowed to protect ourselves? The Vorthon's skin changed from blue to a darker purple. Not allowed? Human, you misunderstand. You are the only ones who must not carry weapons, for everyone's protection. Before Hyunwoo could ask what that meant, a new voice interrupted them. Ambassador Kim, I'm Captain Yoonji Park, head of human security here. Hyunwoo turned to see a woman in her 40s wearing a simple gray uniform. Like him, she carried no visible weapons. Captain Park, good to meet you. I was just learning about the weapon policies here. Yoonji glanced at Nexus, who quickly excused himself and walked away. Yes, it takes some getting used to. Come on, I'll show you to your office. As they walked through the halls, Hyunwoo noticed more details. The alien delegates didn't just carry weapons, they seemed to need them. Security scanners at every doorway checked that each alien was properly armed before allowing them to pass. When they saw humans approaching, the scanners would beep and display green lights without any checks at all. This is very strange, Hyunwoo said. On Earth, we were told that the Senate was a peaceful place where disputes were settled with words, not violence. It is peaceful, Yoonji replied. The weapons aren't for fighting each other. They're... well, you'll understand eventually. They passed a group of tall reptilian beings that Hyunwoo recognized as Zentaurians. These were some of the oldest members of the Galactic Senate, with gray scales that showed their age. One of them, wearing elaborate robes that marked him as a senior senator, watched Hyunwoo with ancient, tired eyes. Senator Kralix, Yoonji said with a respectful nod. The old Zentaurian returned the nod but said nothing. His clawed hand gripped the handle of an ornate energy weapon, and Hyunwoo could see old scars on his scales. They finally reached Hyunwoo's office, a comfortable room with windows overlooking the Senate floor. Yoonji showed him his desk, computer, systems, and communication equipment. Now, Hyunwoo said, settling into his chair, can you explain why humans aren't allowed to carry weapons? Yunji was quiet for a moment. The official reason is that humans are considered peaceful newcomers to the galactic community. We've only been members for about 150 years. And the unofficial reason? The unofficial reason is classified above your current level. She paused. But if you really want to know, I suggest you look into something called the Terra Protocols. That evening, Hyun-woo sat in his temporary quarters, going through the Senate database. Most of the historical records were open to all delegates, but when he searched for Terra Protocols, he found only a brief mention with most details marked as classified. What he could read was troubling. Following the conclusion of the Dominion, wars and the implementation of the Terra Protocols, all human representatives to the Galactic Senate must remain unarmed during assembly sessions. This policy is non-negotiable and vital to maintaining peace in the galactic community. The Dominion Wars had ended nearly a century ago. Hyun-woo knew the basic history. Humanity had helped the Galactic Senate defeat an aggressive alliance of warlike species. It had been humanity's first major contribution to galactic peace. So why did helping win a war result in humans being banned from carrying weapons? The next morning, Hyun-woo attended his first Senate session. The main assembly hall was enormous, with seating for representatives from over 300 worlds. Each section had its own atmosphere and gravity controls to accommodate different species. The human section was small, only 12 seats for Earth's colonies. But Hyun-woo noticed something odd. The human section was positioned in the exact center of the hall, with all other species arranged in concentric circles around them. It looked less like an arrangement for diplomacy and more like a containment strategy. During a break in the proceedings, Hyun-woo approached Senator Kralix. The old Zentorian was standing alone, studying a data pad. "Senator, may I ask you something?" Kralix looked up with those ancient eyes. "You wish to know about the weapon policy?" "Yes, sir. It seems unusual that I was there," Kralix interrupted. "During the wars. I fought alongside humans." He was quiet for a long moment. "Tell me, Ambassador Kim, what do you know about your own species' military history?" "We've had our conflicts, but we've always tried to resolve them peacefully when possible." Kralix made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Peaceful. Yes, that is what humans always claim." He looked around the hall at all the armed delegates. "Do you see fear in this room, Ambassador?" Hyun-woo looked around. Now that Kralix mentioned it, he could see tension in the way other species glanced toward the human section. Their weapons weren't just carried, they were held ready. "I don't understand," Hyun-woo said. "No," Kralix replied. "You do not, but you will." The old senator turned to leave, then paused. "A word of advice, young human. When you learn the truth about why you cannot carry weapons, remember that some policies exist not to restrict the dangerous, but to protect the innocent." That night, Hyun-woo couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Kralix's words and the fearful glances of the other delegates. Finally, he got up and accessed his computer. If the Terra Protocols were classified, maybe he could find information about the Dominion Wars that would explain things. He started with military records, battle reports, and historical analyses. What he found made him sit back in shock. According to the records, human forces had been devastatingly effective during the wars. Not just effective, the reports used words like terrifying, unprecedented, and uncontainable. Human casualty rates were impossibly low, while enemy losses were catastrophic. But that wasn't the strangest part. The strangest part was that the wars had ended not with the defeat of the enemy, but with a peace treaty signed immediately after human forces were deployed. The enemy had surrendered not because they were losing, but because they were afraid to continue fighting alongside humans. Hyunwoo found one final document, a partially declassified report with most text blacked out. Only one line was readable. Recommendation: under no circumstances should human forces be provided with standard galactic weapons systems. Immediate development of containment protocols advised. As he stared at the screen, Hyunwoo began to understand. The other species weren't afraid of humans with weapons. They were afraid of what humans could do with their weapons. And tomorrow, he was going to find out exactly what that meant. 150 years earlier, Commander Taemin Choi stood on the bridge of the Earthship Soul's Pride, watching the stars through the viewport. This was humanity's first journey beyond their solar system, and everyone aboard knew they were making history. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission," reported Communications Officer So Young Lee. "It's coming from the Proxima system. Put it through." The main screen flickered, and suddenly they were looking at something that definitely wasn't human. The alien had blue skin, 4 eyes, and what looked like gills on the sides of its neck. "Greetings, beings of Earth," the alien said through their translation system. "I am Ambassador Vorthak of the Galactic Senate. We have been monitoring your species and wish to make contact." Taemin felt his heart racing. First contact with an alien civilization. This was the moment humanity had dreamed about for centuries. "I am Commander Taemin Choi, representing Earth. We're honored to meet you." "The honor is ours, Commander. However, I must inform you that these are dangerous times. Our galaxy is at war." Over the next few hours, Ambassador Vorthak explained the situation. The Galactic Senate represented hundreds of peaceful worlds working together for trade and mutual protection, but they were being attacked by something called the Hegemony Alliance, a group of aggressive species that wanted to conquer and enslave other worlds. "We could use allies," Vorthak admitted. "Your species shows promise. If you're willing to help us, we can offer you membership in the galactic community." Taemin looked around at his crew. Every face showed the same excitement and determination. This was their chance to prove that humanity belonged among the stars. "We'll help," Taemin said. "What do you need us to do?" 3 weeks later, the Soul's Pride docked at Centauri Station, a massive military base orbiting a gas giant. Taemin and his crew were amazed by the size and technology around them. Ships from dozens of different worlds filled the docking bays, and aliens of every imaginable shape and size worked together preparing for war. General Vakthar, a tall reptilian Zentaurian, met them at the airlock. His scales were a deep green, and he carried himself with the confidence of a veteran warrior. "So you are the humans," he said, looking them up and down. "You seem small." "We may be small, but we're determined," Taemin replied. Vakthar's mouth curved in what might have been a smile. "We shall see. Come, let me show you our weapons." The armory was impressive. Energy rifles that could cut through metal, plasma, cannons that could destroy buildings, and personal shields that could stop most projectile weapons. Dr. So Young Lee, who had been promoted to xenobiologist, studied everything with fascination. "These are amazing," she said, examining a pulse rifle. "The power source alone is beyond anything we have on Earth." "They are standard galactic military equipment," explained Lieutenant Kresh, a Chitaran who looked like a giant praying mantis. "Very reliable and effective against hegemony forces." Engineer Jiho Nam picked up one of the weapons and turned it over in his hands. The balance is good, but the trigger mechanism seems overly complicated. Why so many safety systems? To prevent accidents, Kresh replied. These weapons are powerful enough to damage starship hulls. Jiho nodded, but Taemin noticed he kept examining the weapon with a thoughtful expression. 2 days later, human forces were deployed to Kepler 442b, a contested world where hegemony and Senate forces had been fighting for months. The humans were given a simple mission: support Zentorian ground forces in defending a mining facility. Captain Min Ho Song led the human ground team, with 25 soldiers equipped with standard galactic weapons. They had spent only 6 hours training with the new equipment, but their alien allies assured them it would be enough for a support role. The battle began at dawn. Hegemony forces attacked with overwhelming numbers, using hover tanks and aerial fighters. The Zentorian defenders fought bravely, but were slowly being pushed back. "Human forces, this is General Vakthar," came the voice over their communicators. "We need you to hold the eastern perimeter. Just keep them busy until reinforcements arrive." "Understood," Minho replied, moving to position. What happened next would be talked about in military academies for decades. The human soldiers didn't just use their weapons. They seemed to become one with them. Within minutes, they were hitting targets that Zentorian veterans had missed. They moved through the battlefield like they had been using galactic weapons their entire lives. But that wasn't the most shocking part. The most shocking part was what they did to the weapons themselves. Private Woo Jin Lee noticed that his pulse rifle's cooling system was inefficient. During a brief lull in the fighting, he used his combat knife to open the weapon's casing and reroute some of the internal components. When he fired again, his rate of fire had doubled. Sergeant Hanul Park realized that the plasma charges could be overloaded by bypassing 2 safety systems. Her modified weapon could now punch through enemy armor that had been stopping regular shots. Engineer Jiho Nam, who had somehow ended up in the middle of a firefight, discovered that the power cells from 3 different weapons could be linked together. The resulting blast took out an entire enemy squad. By the end of the day, the hegemony forces were in full retreat. Not only had the humans held their position, they had pushed the enemy back nearly 5 kilometers. General Vakthar arrived at the human position to find 25 soldiers calmly cleaning weapons that looked nothing like the equipment they had been issued that morning. "What did you do to them?" he asked, staring at Minho's heavily modified rifle. "Just made some improvements," Minho replied. "The basic design is good, but there were some obvious inefficiencies." "Improvements?" Vakthar picked up one of the modified weapons. "These modifications should have caused the weapon to explode." "We ran some tests first," Woo Jin said. "The safety margins were very conservative. Dr. So-Young Lee was taking notes on everything she observed. The human soldiers weren't just good at fighting, they understood the weapons on an intuitive level that seemed to amaze their alien allies." "How long did it take you to learn these modifications?" asked Lieutenant Kresh. "About an hour," Hanul replied. "Once you understand the basic principles, the rest is pretty obvious." Kresh's compound eyes focused on her with what looked like disbelief. "It took our engineers 6 months to develop those same modifications, and they required extensive testing. Different approaches, I guess," Minho said with a shrug. That night, General Vakthar sent a report to Senate Command that would change everything. Human forces exceeded all expectations. Casualty ratio: 0 human losses, 347 enemy casualties. However, their modifications to standard equipment are concerning. Recommend immediate technical analysis of human weapons capabilities. The response came back within hours. Understood. Sending weapons research team immediately. Continue monitoring human forces. Over the next few weeks, human soldiers continued to amaze and worry their alien allies. Every new weapon system they encountered was quickly mastered and then improved. Defensive tools became offensive weapons. Simple equipment became devastating instruments of war. The aliens began to realize they had made a mistake. They had thought they were giving weapons to humans. What they had actually done was give humans the basic building blocks to create weapons beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen, and the war was far from over. 3 months into the conflict, the Hegemony Alliance sent a message to Senate Command. We request immediate peace negotiations. We cannot continue this war if humans remain in the field. The message was followed by complete radio silence from all Hegemony forces. For the first time in galactic history, an enemy had surrendered not because they were losing, but because they were afraid of their opponent's allies. Senator Kralix, who was just a young officer then, wrote in his personal log, "The humans claim they want peace, but they have turned every tool we gave them into an instrument of war. What have we unleashed?" Dr. So-Young Lee sat in her temporary laboratory on Centauri Station, surrounded by reports that made her increasingly uncomfortable. As the lead xenobiologist studying human-alien military cooperation, she had access to data that was beginning to paint a disturbing picture. "Computer, display combat effectiveness statistics for human forces," she said. The holographic display showed numbers that seemed impossible. In every engagement over the past 6 months, human casualty rates were almost zero, while enemy losses were catastrophic. But the raw numbers only told part of the story. Display alien observer reports. Now she could see what was really happening. The reports from Zentorian, Vorthon, and Chitaran officers all said the same thing in different words. Humans didn't just use weapons, they became weapons. Lieutenant Kresch's latest report was typical. Human soldiers demonstrate weapon mastery that should require years of training after only hours of exposure. More concerning, they instinctively modify equipment in ways our engineers never considered. Recommend immediate study of human neural adaptability. So Young pulled up her own research notes. She had been studying human brain scans and comparing them to other species in the Galactic database. What she found explained everything and made her deeply worried. Human neuroplasticity was off the charts compared to every other known species. Where most aliens saw tools as separate objects, human brains literally incorporated new tools as extensions of their bodies. Give a human a weapon, and within hours their nervous system would adapt as if they had been born with it. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was that humans seemed to understand not just how to use weapons, but how they worked at a fundamental level. They saw possibilities that other species missed. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in." Captain Min-Ho Song entered, carrying what used to be a standard mining laser. Now it looked like something from a science fiction movie with additional components and modifications that turned it into something entirely different. "Dr. Lee, I wanted to show you something," Min-Ho said. "We've been working on some improvements to the mining equipment." So-Young looked at the device with growing alarm. "Min-Ho, that's not mining equipment anymore. What does it do now?" "Well, it can still mine," Min-Ho said with a grin. "But we figured out how to increase the power output by about 400%. And if you adjust the focus settings, it can cut through the armor on those Hegemony heavy tanks." "You turned a mining tool into an anti-tank weapon? It wasn't hard. The basic principles are the same. You just need to understand how energy focusing works. So Young stared at him. How long did this take you? About 3 hours. Most of that was finding the right components. That evening, So Young called an emergency meeting with the alien command staff. General Vakthar, Lieutenant Kresh, and Ambassador Vorthak gathered in the conference room to hear her report. "We have a problem," she began. "I've been studying human weapon adaptation, and I think we need to reconsider our alliance." "The humans are our most effective allies," Vakthar protested. "Their combat performance is beyond anything we've seen." "That's exactly the problem." So Young activated the holographic display. "Look at these brain scans. Human neuroplasticity is approximately 300% higher than the galactic average. When they use tools, their brains literally rewire themselves to optimize performance." She showed them video footage of human soldiers in action. "Watch this. Private Dong-Hyun Seo received his first energy rifle this morning. By this afternoon, he was outperforming Zentorian veterans with 20 years of experience." "Impressive," Kresh said. "But why is this a problem?" "Because they don't just master weapons. They improve them." She showed them images of modified equipment. "Every tool we give them becomes something more dangerous than we intended. They see potential we never imagined." Ambassador Vorthak leaned forward. "Are you saying humans are too good with weapons?" "I'm saying humans don't see weapons the way we do. For us, a weapon is a tool with a specific purpose. For humans, a weapon is a starting point. They look at it and immediately begin thinking of ways to make it better, more effective, more deadly." She pulled up Minho's modified mining laser. "This was originally designed to cut through rock. Captain Song turned it into something that can destroy armored vehicles, and he did it in 3 hours using spare parts." The room was quiet for a long moment. "There's more," So Young continued. "I've been analyzing their tactical reports. Humans don't just use superior weapons, they use superior strategy. They think about warfare differently than any species we've encountered." She showed them a battle report from the previous week. Sergeant Yuna Kang's squad was pinned down by enemy forces with superior numbers and firepower. Instead of falling back or requesting support, they used their weapons to create an avalanche that buried the entire enemy position. "That's creative," Vakthar admitted. "It's terrifying," So Young replied. "They turned the environment itself into a weapon. And this isn't unusual, it's how they think. Every human soldier I've observed approaches problems the same way. If they can't go through an obstacle, they find a way to use it as a weapon." Lieutenant Kresh spoke up. "What are you recommending?" "I think we need to implement weapons restrictions for human forces. Not because they're ineffective, but because they're too effective." "You want to disarm our best allies?" Vakthar asked. "I want to control what they have access to before they accidentally create something that could destroy a planet." As if summoned by her words, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed as a voice came over the communication system. "All personnel to emergency stations. Hull breach in Section 7. They rushed to the command center, where they found chaos. Technicians were shouting reports while damage control teams ran through the corridors. "What happened?" Vakthar demanded. "It was the humans, sir," reported a young Zentorian officer. "Engineer Jiho Nam was testing a modified plasma cutter. The beam punched through 6 levels of hull plating before we could shut it down." 6 levels. Vorthak stared at the damage reports. "That's impossible. Plasma cutters don't have that kind of power." "They do now," the officer replied grimly. "The human made some modifications, An hour later, they found Jiho in the engineering bay, looking embarrassed and surrounded by very nervous alien technicians. "I'm really sorry," he said. "I was just trying to improve the cutting efficiency. I didn't expect it to be quite so effective." "What did you do to it?" Vakthar asked. "Just some basic modifications to the power coupling and focus array, and I figured out how to chain multiple units together for increased output." Jiho gestured to a device that looked nothing like the original equipment. "The theory was sound, but I think I miscalculated the power requirements." "So?" Young looked at the modified plasma cutter with growing dread. "Jiho, how powerful is this thing now?" "Well, with the modifications, it should be able to cut through about..." "Oh." His face went pale. "Oh, no." "What?" "If I did the math right, this thing could cut through the hull of a battleship." The room went completely silent. "You turned a maintenance tool into a ship-killer weapon?" Kresh asked quietly. "By accident," Jiho said quickly. "I was just trying to make it work better." That night, emergency protocols were implemented across all Senate forces. Human access to weapons and equipment was immediately restricted pending a full review, but the damage was already done. Word of human weapon capabilities spread throughout both the Senate and Hegemony forces. 3 days later, the Hegemony Alliance sent an urgent message. "We formally request immediate ceasefire and peace negotiations. We cannot continue military operations against forces equipped with human-modified weapons." The war that had raged for 5 years was over in less than a week, not because the Senate had won, but because the enemy was too afraid to keep fighting. In his final report, General Vakthar wrote, "Humans have ended this war, but I fear they have started something much worse. We have seen what they can do with our weapons. I pray we never see what they can do with their own." Admiral Grixtar of the Zentaurian fleet stood in his command center, staring at reports that made him question everything he thought he knew about warfare. The Hegemony Alliance had officially surrendered, but the problems with humanity were just beginning. "Admiral, we have another incident," reported his aide, Commander Thelkon. "Human forces on Rigel Station." "What did they do this time?" "Sergeant Wu Jin Lee was assigned to guard duty with standard patrol equipment. He somehow turned his communication device into a weapon that can disable enemy electronics from 3 kilometers away." Grixtar closed his eyes and counted to 10. This was the 15th incident in the past month. Every time they gave humans standard equipment, the humans found ways to turn it into something dangerous. How? He used components from the medical scanner, parts of his environmental suit, and some kind of crystalline material he found in the station's geology lab. Our engineers are still trying to figure out how it works. The door to the command center opened, and Dr. So Young Lee entered with several data pads. She had been appointed as the official liaison between human forces and alien command, a job that was becoming increasingly difficult. "Admiral, we need to talk about the weapon restriction protocols," she said. "You mean the ones that aren't working?" Grixtar replied. "Dr. Lee, we've restricted human access to military weapons, experimental technology, and even basic tools. They keep finding ways around every limitation." So Young nodded grimly. "That's what I want to discuss. I've been studying the psychological profiles of human soldiers, and I think I understand the problem." She activated a holographic display showing brain activity patterns. "When we restrict human access to conventional weapons, their brains don't just accept the limitation. They immediately begin analyzing their environment for alternatives." "Alternatives?" "Everything becomes a potential weapon. their medical supplies, construction equipment, even their food rations. Give a human enough motivation, and they'll find a way to turn anything into a tool of destruction. Admiral Grixtar thought about the latest reports. Engineer Hanul Park had created explosives from medical supplies. Technician Sujin Bei had turned construction vehicles into mobile artillery. Private Donghyun Co had somehow weaponized the ship's waste recycling system. So what are you recommending? I think we need to implement complete technological isolation for human forces. No access to any advanced equipment whatsoever. That would make them useless as allies. Admiral, with respect, I'm not sure we can afford to have them as allies. Before Grixtar could respond, emergency alarms began sounding throughout the ship. The main display showed incoming hegemony forces. Apparently, some faction had decided to continue fighting despite the official surrender. All hands to battle stations, Grixtar ordered. Deploy fighter squadrons and prepare for engagement. The battle was intense but brief. Hegemony forces had brought 3 heavy cruisers and a dozen fighters against the Senate's single battleship. It should have been an even match, but something went wrong almost immediately. Admiral, one of our escort ships just rammed the enemy flagship, Commander Thelkon reported in shock. Rammed it? That's impossible. Our pilots don't use ramming tactics. Sir, it was the Soul's Pride, Captain Sujin Bei's ship. On the main screen, they watched as the human-commanded vessel plowed directly through the hegemony cruiser's hull, destroying both ships instantly. But instead of being a desperate last resort, it appeared to be a calculated tactical decision. Why would she do that? Grixtar wondered aloud. Dr. So-Young Lee was studying the tactical display with a horrified expression. Because she realized her ship could be used as a weapon. Ships aren't weapons. They're homes, transportation, not to humans. So-Young pulled up the communication logs. Look at this. Captain Bei calculated that her ship's mass and velocity could penetrate the enemy's shields and armor more effectively than any conventional weapon. She turned her entire vessel into a guided missile. The implications hit everyone in the command center at the same time. Humans didn't just see individual objects as potential weapons, they saw everything as potential weapons, including their own ships. Get me a channel to all human commanders immediately, Grixtar ordered. Within minutes, he was connected to the remaining human ships in the battle zone. All human vessels, this is Admiral Grixtar. You are ordered to maintain safe distance from enemy forces and provide support only. Admiral, this is Commander Taemin Choi of the Busan Runner. We can end this engagement immediately if you'll authorize ramming speed. Absolutely not. You will not ram enemy vessels. Sir, with respect, it's the most efficient tactical option. Our structural analysis shows we can take out their remaining cruisers with minimal losses. Commander, ramming is not an acceptable IA tactic. There was a pause. Admiral, then what do you want us to do with our ships? The question hung in the air. Grixtar realized that the human commander genuinely didn't understand why using ships as weapons was problematic. To humans, everything was just a tool to be used as efficiently as possible. Just stay back and let our regular forces handle this. The battle ended an hour later with conventional tactics, but the damage to alien confidence in their human allies was complete. That evening, emergency meetings were held on every Senate world. Ambassador Vorthak represented the growing faction that wanted humans removed from all military operations. They cannot be trusted with any equipment whatsoever. They see weapons where we see tools, tactics where we see transportation, and opportunities where we see limitations. But they're effective, argued General Vakthar. Their casualty rates are still the lowest in the fleet. Because they're willing to sacrifice their ships, their equipment, even their bases if it gives them a tactical advantage, Vorthak replied. They don't value anything except victory. Dr. So-Young Lee had spent the day interviewing human soldiers about their tactical thinking. The results were disturbing. I asked 50 human personnel what they would do if trapped on a space station with no weapons and enemy forces approaching, she reported. Every single one immediately began describing ways to use the station's life support systems, artificial gravity, and structural components as weapons. That's practical, Vakthar said uncertainly. Admiral, they described methods to turn a peaceful space station into a bomb that could destroy everything within a 100-kilometer radius. And they did it casually like they were discussing. The weather. The final straw came 3 days later. Maintenance Chief Jaewon Shin had been assigned to routine repairs on a communications array. When he finished, the array had somehow been converted into a device capable of jamming all electronic systems within an entire star system. I was just trying to boost the signal strength, Jaewon explained to the investigative committee. But I realized that if you reverse the polarity and increase the output by a few thousand%, you could theoretically disable any electronic device within range. A few thousand%. Commander Thelkon stared at the modified equipment. How is that even possible? You just need to understand harmonic frequencies and electromagnetic pulse theory. It's actually pretty simple once you think about it. That night, the Senate Emergency Council met in closed session. The decision was unanimous. Humans could no longer be trusted with any form of advanced technology. We've created a monster, admitted Senator Kralix, who had been observing human forces since the beginning of the war. We thought we were giving them tools to help us. Instead, we've shown them possibilities they never imagined. So what do? Asked Ambassador Vorthak. We implement the Terra protocols, Kralix replied grimly. Complete technological restriction. No weapons, no advanced equipment, no access to military technology of any kind. That will essentially disarm them completely. Yes, Kralix said, and pray that's enough to keep them contained. The Terra protocols were implemented within a week. Human forces were removed from all military operations and restricted to basic, non-technological equipment only. No weapons, no advanced tools, no access to anything that could be modified or weaponized. The official announcement claimed it was a reward for their service. Humans were so valued as peaceful diplomats that they would be exempt from the burden of military service. But the classified documents told a different story. Human forces represent an unacceptable risk to galactic security. Their ability to weaponize any available technology makes them too dangerous to arm and too creative to ignore. Recommendation: permanent disarmament with constant monitoring. The war was over, but for the Galactic Senate, a new kind of fear had just begun. Ambassador Hyunwoo Kim sat in his office, staring at the classified files that Captain Yoonji Park had finally cleared him to access. The Terra protocols weren't just about weapons restrictions. They were about something much more fundamental and terrifying. Computer, display document, Senate Xenopsychology Report, 2387, Section 7. The screen filled with text that made his blood run cold. Analysis of human behavioral patterns in combat. Scenarios: when denied access to conventional weapons, human subjects demonstrate exponentially increased creativity in identifying alternative tools of violence. Recommendation: humans must never be placed in situations where they feel genuinely threatened while completely disarmed. A knock on his door interrupted his reading. "Come in." Captain Yunji Park entered, followed by an alien he didn't recognize. A tall, thin being with pale purple skin and large, intelligent eyes. "Ambassador, I'd like you to meet Dr. Zenthara of the Senate Xenopsychology Department. She's the lead researcher on human behavioral studies." Dr. Zenthara's translator gave her voice a musical quality as she spoke. "Ambassador Kim, I understand you've been investigating the historical basis for current human policies. Yes, and what I've learned is disturbing. According to these files, the Terra Protocols weren't created to honor humanity. They were created to contain us." "That is partially correct," Dr. Zenthara said carefully. "May I sit?" Hyunwoo gestured to the chairs around his conference table. As they settled, Dr. Zenthara activated a small device that created a privacy field around them. "What I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels," she began. "The Terra Protocols exist because of a discovery we made during our psychological analysis of human soldiers after the Dominion Wars." She activated a holographic display showing brain scans and behavioral charts. "We found that humans have a unique relationship with tools and weapons that no other known species shares. When most species lose access to weapons, they seek alternatives or retreat. Humans do something else entirely." "What do they do?" "They reimagine their entire environment as a weapon system." The display showed video footage of human soldiers in training scenarios. "These are tests we conducted 50 years ago. We placed human volunteers in controlled environments with no weapons and simulated threat scenarios." Hyun-woo watched as the humans in the video immediately began dismantling furniture, removing panels from walls, and creating weapons from the most basic materials. "This was a medical facility," Dr. Zenthara explained. "Within 30 minutes, the human subjects had created explosives from cleaning supplies, improvised weapons from medical equipment, and turned the ventilation system into a delivery method for chemical agents. They were just being resourceful, Ambassador. They turned a peaceful medical facility into a death trap that could have killed hundreds of people. And they did it instinctively, without training or preparation." The video continued, showing humans creating increasingly sophisticated weapons and traps from materials that other species would never consider dangerous. "But that's not the worst part," Dr. Zenthara continued. "The worst part is what happens when humans feel truly threatened." She showed him another video, this one from a more recent test. This simulation involved a human diplomat, someone with no military training, being told that hostile forces were approaching and all weapons had been confiscated. Hyunwoo watched as the diplomat, a middle-aged woman named Mi Young-oh, began analyzing her environment with frightening efficiency. Within an hour, she had identified 17 different ways to kill an attacker using only the contents of a standard diplomatic office. She created a chemical weapon from her coffee maker and cleaning supplies. She turned her desk lamp into an electrical weapon. She even figured out how to use the office's artificial gravity generator as a trap. All from office supplies? All from office supplies. And Ambassador, this woman was a translator with no combat experience whatsoever. Dr. Zenthara leaned forward. "Do you understand what this means? Every human in the Senate is essentially a living weapon, even when they appear completely harmless." The door chimed, and a new voice spoke. "That's exactly right." They turned to see Jae-won Shin, a human historian who worked in the Senate archives. He was a small, quiet man who seemed completely harmless, which, Hyunwoo was beginning to realize, meant nothing when it came to humans. "Mr. Shin," Captain Park said, "you shouldn't be here. This is a classified briefing." "I know. I've been compiling classified records for the past 60 years. Jae-won smiled apologetically. I thought Ambassador Kim should know the complete truth. Dr. Zenthara's skin changed to a darker purple. What complete truth? Jae-won activated his own data pad. The real reason for the Terra protocols. Dr. Zenthara showed you the tests with volunteers who knew they were being observed. I have the records of what happened when humans didn't know they were being tested. New images appeared in the holographic display. This was Station Beta 7, a research facility where human scientists were working on peaceful projects. They had no idea they were being monitored by Senate intelligence. The images showed a clean, efficient research station with humans working on various scientific projects. Everything was normal until they received a false alarm about hostile forces approaching. The station's alien security officers confiscated all weapons as a safety precaution. What happened next was terrifying. Within 6 hours, the human scientists had turned their research station into something that resembled a fortress from a nightmare. Every corridor had been trapped, every room had been converted into a potential weapon, and the station's power core had been modified into a bomb capable of destroying everything within 50 kilometers. They weren't soldiers, Jae-won said quietly. They were botanists, geologists, and medical researchers. And they turned a peaceful research station into the most dangerous facility in known space. Hyunwoo stared at the images. All because they thought they were under attack? All because they thought they were under attack and had been disarmed, Dr. Zenthara corrected. This is why the Terra protocols exist. Armed humans are dangerous, but disarmed humans who feel threatened are absolutely terrifying. Jae-won pulled up more files. The Senate's real fear isn't what humans might do with weapons. It's what humans might do without them. Every psychological study shows the same pattern. The more restrictions you place on human access to weapons, the more creative and dangerous they become. So why allow us in the Senate at all? Hyunwoo asked. Because, Dr. Zenthara said, completely. Excluding humans from galactic society would make them feel threatened. And isolated, threatened humans are the most dangerous force in the known universe. Captain Park spoke up. The current policy is the result of decades of careful psychological management. Humans are given important roles and treated with respect, but never allowed access to advanced weapons. We're monitored constantly, but subtly. And most importantly, we're never put in situations where we might feel genuinely threatened. The other species aren't armed to protect themselves from each other, Jae-won added. They're armed to remind themselves and us of what humans can do when properly motivated. Hyunwoo looked around the room. So we're not diplomats. We're contained threats. You're both, Dr. Zenthara said. Humans make excellent diplomats precisely because everyone knows what you're capable of. When a human says we should resolve this peacefully, other species listen very carefully. And if we ever felt truly threatened as a species? The room was quiet for a long moment. Then the galaxy would see what happens when an entire planet of weaponless humans decides to arm itself, Captain Park said finally. And no one wants to find out what that would look like. Jae-won pulled up one final document. There's a classified Senate contingency plan called the Omega Protocol. If humanity ever begins militarizing on a planetary scale, every species in the galaxy has agreed to immediate evacuation of the local galactic arm. They'd abandon an entire section of the galaxy? Rather than face an armed human civilization with the knowledge and motivation to expand into space, yes, they consider it the only viable survival strategy. Dr. Zenthara stood to leave. Ambassador Kim, I hope this helps you understand your position here. You're not restricted because you're weak. You're restricted because you're the most dangerous species in known space. The Terra protocols exist to keep the peace by ensuring that humans never feel the need to pick up weapons again. After the aliens left, Hyunwoo sat alone with Jae-won and Captain Park. So this is why other species looked nervous around us, Hyunwoo said. Every alien delegate in that assembly hall knows that the only thing standing between them and annihilation is humanity's continued belief that we don't need weapons, Captain Park replied. And if that ever changed, Jae-won smiled sadly, then the universe would learn why humans are the only species in galactic history to be simultaneously feared and desperately needed to remain peaceful. Hyunwoo looked out his window at the Senate Assembly Hall, where hundreds of armed alien delegates conducted the business of galactic civilization under the watchful eyes of a few dozen weaponless humans. For the first time, he understood that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't any tool or technology.